Hey there, mi familia, and welcome back to the show. I am your host, Megan Hardy, and I am not Spanish, but I am the founder of Fitness Uncharted, which is my fitness and nutrition coaching company designed to help women build muscle, lose fat, and improve your metabolism so that you can feel healthy and confident and have complete food freedom. And I just have to keep you guys on your toes. So I used the few little bits of Spanish that I know at the beginning of the show. But I used to be able to speak Spanish and I took classes in college. And if I was immersed in a Spanish speaking country, I know I could have like really ingrained it and picked it up. But I never did that. And then I haven't really used it since. So now I'm like, hola, you know, you know, me familia. I feel like the chick from what's the movie Bridesmaids where she's like trying to speak Spanish. Anyway, I wish I could. I would love to be bilingual. Today, guys, we're going to talk about how to find the right weight for squats. And that's for both your working sets and your squat max or PR or your personal best. And we'll talk more about working sets and what that is. But we want to find the right weight for squats so that we get stronger because what happens when we get stronger? We're building muscle. And for most of you listening to this, whether you are a newbie to training or a veteran lifter, you may not be pushing yourself enough with your squats, or this really applies actually to any of the lifts that you're doing, especially those compound lifts where you have more range for moving more weight. Like, for instance, on a deadlift or a squat, something like that, even pull ups, bench press, those movements, you're going to have a larger range of higher weight that you're going to be able to move versus more accessory exercises, or things like your bicep curls or tricep extensions, things like that. You're not going to be lifting like 200 pounds for a bicep curl or a tricep extension, right? So you have a smaller like weight range you're probably going to be working with. But this whole principle and what we're going to talk about today about finding the right weight or the correct weight for the number of allotted reps, this can apply to any of the exercises that you are doing if you're not sure if you're moving enough weight. So let's jump in. And I wanted to address this because a lot of people, especially women, I hate to stereotype, sorry, ladies, but it's true, are scared of using heavier weight. And I don't say this as like hypothetically or as a just random stereotype. I know this because I talk to a lot of women every day about training, nutrition, and fitness. And you start to hear common themes, right? Or I even have, trained a lot of clients who think they are using the correct working weight. And we work with a lot of clients who are not newbies to training. They're the women who have been training for years. They know macros, they know lifting. They're just not quite seeing the results that they want. And we just need to tweak things and dial things in. Like, that's where you have a really solid foundation, but you're just missing a few little puzzle pieces. And you may think that, you're using the correct working weight. And when I say working weight, let's talk about that really quick for anyone who's not familiar. That just means the weight that you're doing for reps. So versus like your 1 rep max is the weight that you can only do for 1 rep. Your working weight is the weight that you're doing for those working sets. So you might have like your warm up weight or your 1 rep max, but those aren't your working weight. That's not your working weight. So you might be like thinking that you're doing the correct weight, but in reality, you're totally sandbagging the weight and you could actually do a good bit more. And I use the term sandbagging. If you don't know what that means, that's just like my slang for you are like bojangling. You're not actually pushing yourself as hard as you think you are. You're sandbagging, right? So I'm totally guilty of this too. Like, I will call myself out all day. I sometimes sandbag the weight. And, you might have seen reels on Instagram about this, but like where let's say the girl is doing like a chest fly or something, right? And then her boyfriend or husband comes up behind her and she's like, "Oh, can you like lower the weight? I need you to lower it." So he puts the pin you know, he pretends to put it at a lighter weight, but then he puts it right back where it was. And then she goes again for the next set and she's like, oh, that's so much better. Thank you. But he really actually didn't change the weight. And you're like, huh, isn't that interesting? That's because, mentally she was like fatiguing and mentally drained, but she could actually push more than she thought. And so we don't want to sandbag the weight, you guys. We want to push the weight to get the best results. So I know moving more weight is scary at first. It is. But the only way to get comfortable with more weight is to move more weight. We have to move more weight to get comfortable with more weight. There really isn't any other way around it. And fitness and training are so mental. They are so mental. It is such a mindset game. Like, I would say fitness, nutrition, a healthy lifestyle, all of it, but also your training. It is a mindset game too. Like, if you get under the bar, let's say you get under the barbell and you're ready to go, but you say, I don't know if I can do this, you're going to get a totally different outcome and you're probably going to get less reps or you're going to go to failure or something like that. Versus if you step under the bar, you breathe, you brace your core, you look yourself dead in the eye in the mirror and say to yourself, silently or out loud, I got this, right? That mindset going into it can be the game changer between you getting those couple extra reps or that little bit extra weight versus not. So it literally starts here. I'm pointing to my brain. It starts in your head. Like when you go to move heavy weight, if you're telling yourself you don't got it, you're not going to got it. You ain't going to get it. Okay. So you've got to actually literally start with how you're talking to yourself about moving the heavier weight too. And this is all about finding the correct weight. So this is the only form of progressive overload we're going to be talking about in this episode. But also, heavy weight is relative. So when we're talking heavy weight, I don't mean you have to go lifting hundreds of pounds. It's heavy relative to you. So heavy weights should be what is heavy for you and for that given exercise. Because again, I, Megan, am not going to go doing heavy weight for my squats. Is not going to be the same kind of heavy weight for my tricep extension. I will bust a tricep. I'll pull a tricep muscle or joint. Like it'll just pop off my arm if I try to move the same weight. So heavy is relative to the person and it's also relative to the exercise too. But then there's also other forms of progressive overload. You don't always have to increase the weight. You can increase sets or volume or time under tension, other ways to fatigue the muscle. But today we are talking about finding the correct weight. If you want to learn more about other forms of progressive overload, you can go listen to that episode. I want to say it's like episode 7 or something. I didn't look before recording this. So it's earlier on in our episodes, but go give that a listen. Just search for progressive overload, the muscle makeover, and you'll see that episode. But before we jump in, let me just put a little legal disclaimer out there that you should consult with a healthcare professional before engaging in any activity that may pose a risk to your health. This is not medical advice or even coaching advice, and we are not liable for any injury sustained during your participation. Yada 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 yada. Basically, guys, take this information and use it at your own risk. I don't know you, so I can't give you specific advice, right? Unless you're a current client listening to this. That's the one exception. I do know you, actually. Hey, girl. But, for most of you, I don't know you or know you that well. Even if we've had conversations over social media, I probably don't know your exact situation in and out. So I can't give you specific advice. And, if you don't feel comfortable doing this on your own and you want specific advice for yourself, you can scroll down to the show notes and you can book a consultation for one-on-one coaching. Otherwise, just be smart. Be smart. Don't push way past your comfort zone, but do find that balance because I find a lot of people stay stuck in their comfort zone because they don't want to hurt themselves or they're just scared or whatever, and they never push past that. So having a coach or a trainer or whatever can really help, but also don't go like gung ho balls to the walls. Like as an example, let's say you're moving, 100 pounds, squatting 100 pounds, and you're like, well, let me go find my 1 rep max, squat max. Let me try 200 pounds. Well, that's just dumb, you guys. Okay. don't make those kind of jumps or decisions. Be smart, okay? And just take this information as what it is. It's information, and I'm giving you guys and trying to help, but obviously can't be super specific to you. So let's jump in. And first things first, be skeptical of your own RIR. And first of all, what is RIR? That is reps in reserve. And ideally, you only have like 1 to 2 or maybe 3 reps in reserve. And that just means that, like, you find that weight for whatever the exercise is. You find the weight where you could have probably only done 1 to 2 more reps with good form before failing. Like those 1 to 2 reps would have been, a little bit questionable, right? That means that you are finding that weight that's the right intensity for the allotted number of reps. And more than that, and you're not, if you have more reps in reserve than 1 to 2 or maybe 3, then you're not using the right weight. When I hear people say, quote unquote, that workout was too easy, I chuckle to myself. And my response is usually, you weren't using the right weight. Because literally any strength workout can be challenging if you're using the correct weight for the prescribed exercise. So whenever I hear, like, especially if I ever have a client, I love you guys, that tells me one of my workout programming is not challenging for them, I'm like, honey buns, we need to sit down and chat about RIR and progressive overload and finding the right weight, because it should be challenging. And again, you guys, this doesn't mean you have to be lifting like a power lifter, super, super heavy all the time. It's finding the right weight that's heavy for you and for the exercise and the allotted number of reps. So that's RIR. And you want to be skeptical of your own RIR, especially if you're newer to training. So you may think you have 1 to 2 reps in reserve, but really it's like 3 or 4 or more. And if you're moving the last rep as smoothly and quickly as the first, you probably have more RIR than you think. So that's one easy telltale sign is, yeah, your heart rate might be starting to pick up. You're getting hot, your muscles are fatiguing, but that last rep went up and down, let's say for a squat, just as fast and smoothly as the first. Then you probably had more reps in reserve than 1 to 2. Like, you'll start to notice, as let's say if you're doing 10 reps to keep it simple, you'll notice when you start to get to, if you're using the right weight, when you start to get to that 8th, 9th, 10th rep, things are slowing down and it's taking more focused effort and energy to just stand back up. And you're not intentionally trying to slow down, it's just happening, right? So you might have more reps in reserve than you think. And then the more familiar that you get with each lift, the better you'll be able to determine your true RIR. But even still, you probably need to test yourself every now and then. So again, like, the more experienced of a lifter you are, you probably do have a better understanding for what your true RIR is. But that's also where we can get really complacent and comfortable. And as we're getting stronger overall, what we thought was, our weight for, 1 to 2 reps in reserve is now actually, we could do more reps with that weight now. So now we have more reps in reserve because we've gotten stronger. And if we never push that limit and test it, we're never going to find that out, and we're going to stay right where we are versus continuing to make progress. So be skeptical of that. That's the first thing. And as another example for you guys, actually, my husband is helping one of his friends right now out with some fitness stuff. And it's funny because people are like, does Justin, my husband, they're like, does he train people? And I'm like, no, he might as well, because he helps so many people and gives out so much free advice too. I'm like, really, he should be on the podcast with me. But he's helping his friend out, and he asked his friend to test his squat PR to figure out how much weight he should be using on his working sets, because what we're going to talk about here in a second is, by finding your squat PR, that will help you determine your working weight for reps. And once his friend did this, after he tested out his 1 rep max, his friend was able to increase his working weight from 170 pounds to 230 pounds. You guys, That's a huge increase. That's a 35% increase. He was doing working sets at 170 and then was able to jump literally overnight to 230 pounds. Does that mean that he all of a sudden got that much stronger and was able to, wow, magically lift that much more weight? Nope. You don't increase or have strength gains that fast for sure. But that means that when he tested his one rep max, he realized, oh, okay, like 70% of what my one rep max is actually this much weight. Let's say it was 230 pounds. He's like, well, shoot, I should be able to do reps, say 8 to 10 reps or whatever at 230 pounds. He went and he did it and he was able to successfully do it with good form and not hurt himself, right? That's what I'm talking about when I say sandbagging. Like let's say he thought 170 pounds was his working weight for that number of reps, but in reality, he could do so much more. And again, it comes back to our mindset. It's often our minds telling us that this is the weight, we just kind of like accept the status quo. Like, yeah, I guess this is the weight I could do for this rep range instead of testing it out. Either we're scared to test it out or we just kind of get complacent and we just accept that, oh, this is what I could do last month, for this rep range, or this was what I could do last year for this rep range. Well, you should probably retest it and see how much more weight you can do. So, first things first, let's say how his friend tested this, you want to test your one rep max. You probably want a spotter for this. So, all of my veteran lifters know what a spotter is, but if you don't, that's the person who's going to come behind you and they're going to get nice, close, and comfortable. So pick someone you're comfortable with, ladies. And they're going to hook their arms up underneath of you. When you're working, they'll be a little bit behind you. They won't be like right up on you. But especially as you get to that struggle rep, they might come up under you if needed. So be ready for that. It's very much like a butt to crotch situation. So, yeah, just saying that. So pick a spotter you're comfortable with, but also someone who knows what they're doing. Do not pick a spotter who won't actually be able to spot you. And what they're doing is if you start to fail or they see you, starting to, a good spotter is not going to wait until you completely fail and fall on the floor. They're going to see you starting to fail on the way back up out of the hole. If you're squatting and you're down in the bottom of what's called the hole, you're at the deepest point of your squat and you go to stand back up and you start to slow down, mid stand. They're going to see that and see like, okay, if she completely stalls and she's not going upwards anymore, she's about to go back downwards, right? So I need to give her that little bit of oomph and just come up underneath of her armpits and give her a little bit of a pull up. That's going to give you enough momentum to stand the rest of the way back up. So that's what a spotter is for. A good spotter is also not going to come in too soon. So sometimes if you're like, oh, not sure what you're looking at and you think someone's failing, they might not actually be failing yet. They're just pushing through and it's so heavy. The movement's really slowing down, but they just need to push past that little sticking point. So, also as a spotter, don't jump in there too soon, but do be watching for them to get stuck and then go ahead and help them to stand up. So you might want a spotter if you're testing out your one rep max, and you can also use the safety bars in the squat rack. So I would put them just below the lowest point of your squat depth. So go ahead without even any weight on your back, test out your lowest point of your squat depth, and then put the bars on each side of the rack. Go ahead and place them like one notch lower than that lowest point where your shoulders, if the bar was on your shoulders, and you could just do this with the barbell to test as well without weight on the barbell, but go ahead and squat down. And basically you want the safety bars right below where you'd be able to set the barbell down easily on those safety bars. Because then whether you have a spotter or not, let's say you do fail the lift and you couldn't stand back up, you literally just go down another like inch or two and like you lower down even further than your lowest squat depth, and the barbell is caught on the safety bars and you can just slip out from underneath. So the safety bars come in super handy. I like to use the safety bars just on all of my squats and lifts, even when I'm using heavier weight for reps, because I don't usually use a spotter for me. And it's just that like extra little bit of precaution. So use the safety bars to your advantage and also know there's a fine line between testing your max but not being stupid. I kind of talked about this earlier, but heavier weight may be scary and that is normal. So go ahead and accept that if you're starting to move heavier weight. Even when I'm sometimes going from my heavy weight just up, you know, I've pretty much found my max weights for different rep ranges. So, like, even if I just go up at that point another like 5 pounds or even 10 pounds, I'm like, I've really got to talk to myself because it's mental. And I'm like, okay, this is heavier weight than I've ever done for this rep range. I'm a little nervous, right? Like, it's scary. That's normal. But don't do more than you feel comfortable with, especially if you don't have a spotter. So, like, just be smart again. Like, don't, that's where, especially if you really are at close to that max for those a lot of number of reps, don't go jumping 25 pounds or 30 pounds, 50 pounds. Like, that's just stupid. Like, especially if you are more experienced and you're really close to that max weight for that rep range, going up 5 pounds can be a lot. So, just be smart. And especially if you don't have a spotter, someone who is there who can support you if you fail the lift. Again, don't just go grabbing any Joe Schmo because they may not actually know what to do to help you. With that being said, you should not completely fail the lift. So that means you chose a weight that is absurdly too heavy for you. For instance, if you go down in a squat, you're at the bottom, and you just like legitimately cannot stand back up, that weight was just like way too heavy. Like, if you have a spotter and they see you start to fail, AKA you're slowing down to a complete stop on the way up, then with them giving you just a little bit of assistance under the armpits, that should be enough to help you stand the rest of the way up. And that means that the weight was still too heavy. You weren't able to complete one rep on your own. So that's not your one rep max because you couldn't complete it by yourself, right? So it's like, okay, lighten up the weight, maybe 10 pounds, and let's see how you can do with that, right? Take a break, take a good solid rest before trying it again, lighten the weight and figure out what that one rep max is. Then what you want to do is find the percentage of max weight that you want to use based on your rep range or how much weight you can do for the allotted number of reps. So, for example, maybe you want to do 10 reps at 70% of your squat max. And I'll just use mine as an example. This is where, if you're not really a math or numbers person, try to stick with me or follow with me. I'm not either. I'm a very visual learner, but I'm going to try to simplify this. So let's just use mine as an example. It's been a while since I tested my squat max, but last time I did, I think it was around 250 pounds. So let's take 250, my one rep max, and multiply it by zero point 0.7. That's going to give me 70% of my squat max. So if you multiply whatever your one rep max is by the percentage, so you'll do 0. If you want to do 50%, you'll do 0.5. If you want to do 80%, 0.8. Let's say we're doing 70%. So we're going to multiply by 0.7, and that's going to give us 175 pounds. Okay. Now, for me, I usually do higher weight than that for a 10 rep range. So let's reverse this and choose the weight first and then figure out what percentage that is of my one rep max. Okay. So let's say I am squatting 205 pounds. And I do use 205 pounds quite often. So let's say I'm squatting 205 pounds. If my max squat weight is 250, then divide 205 by 250, and that gets you 0.82 is what the number will come out to. 205 divided by 250 would be 0.82, which is 82% of my max weight, which is heavy as crap for 10 reps. So if you are doing like a higher rep range, like, 10 reps, 12 reps, something like that, and you're working at 80% or more, that's heavy. That's like, you're gonna, that's a lot. So, what you can also think is the higher the rep range, the less percent of your max you're probably using, and the lower the rep range, the higher percent of your one rep max you should be using, right? Makes sense. More volume, little less weight, less volume or less reps, a little bit more weight, right? And if all of that was like, wow, okay, processing, it's okay. Go back and listen again. And here's another tip for you guys too. If you're worried about trying for your 1 rep max, then you can also figure out what your 2 or 3 rep max is. And I would recommend trying for like your 2 rep max. But just like if you're really not comfortable, you're like, I just don't want to, go that far. Or let's say you do try for your 1 rep max, but maybe again, you were scared to go too heavy. So you go for a 1 rep max and you go down and come back up. And then you're like, well, shoot, I think I could actually do another one. So you are like, okay, I'm going to try another one. And you go back down and you come back up. And then you're like, oh, I don't think I got a third one. I think that was it. Like, I'm not going to be able to get a third one with good form. Okay. You just found your 2 rep max, which is great. And if that's the case, and you find what your 2 or 3 rep max is, you can then go to bodybuilding.com and you can actually just search for 1 rep max calculator, bodybuilding.com. You can literally go Google that and it will predict your 1 rep max based on your 2 rep max that you just did. So, based off the numbers for your 2 rep max, the weight and the 2 reps that you did, it'll tell you what your 1 rep max would be. And then it'll also give you all of your percentages. So, for example, like what is 95% of your 1 rep max? What is 65% of your 1 rep max, etc. So that's a really helpful tool as well. Again, to kind of even just check yourself. So use that to your advantage. And then at the end of the day, don't get too hung up on the numbers. Like pushing yourself and challenging yourself with the weight and using RIR, what is that? Reps in reserve, and RPE, or rate of perceived exertion, even though there's some flaws with that because our perceived exertion might be because we're like out of breath or our heart rate is elevated or something like that versus are we really pushing the weight? So do watch out for that too. But if you're challenging yourself and using RIR and RPE as a gauge, those are usually sufficient. But sometimes it is good to recheck yourself and make sure you are continuing to push yourself and make progress. If you are making strength gains, just remember you're making muscle gains. And that's what we're all about, the muscle makeover. So there's so much more I could say on this. And I know that was like very in the weeds. So it's hard to condense these concepts down sometimes because I feel like I have to generalize them so much when it's really nuanced for each person. So I hope that helps. And if you're like, WTF, IDK, Megan, then head to the show notes and book a call so we can chat about one-on-one coaching and help you out. So that's it, you guys. I'll catch you on the next episode. And if you're enjoying the show, be sure to subscribe.